Elected me to help and to protect. So I told my team it's time to cancel the Jacksonville, Florida component of the GOP convention.
You heard it right there. The Jacksonville portion of the Republican National Convention is officially canceled. The president citing a, quote, flare-up of coronavirus cases within the state of Florida. So what happens next, and what does Mayor Curry have to say about this? We want to get right out to Renata DiGregorio. She's standing by live this morning right outside of the VyStar Veterans Memorial Arena, where a portion of the convention was expected to be held. Let's turn things over to her now for a look at the fallout from this cancellation.
Good morning, Keitha. Yeah, this announcement caught a lot of people by surprise, but now local leaders are supporting the president. Let's go over what some of them said. Mayor Lenny Curry and Sheriff Mike Williams actually issued a joint statement in it saying that they appreciate the president considering the public health and safety concerns in making an incredibly difficult decision. Now, the Duval GOP chairman, Dean Black, he actually just told us earlier yesterday that he was sure they could get all the resources to address the concerns of the city council president, Tommy Hazouri. He was worried about community spread, and then also addressed the concerns of Sheriff Mike Williams, who said that they were not prepared for this. So Black actually writes in a statement, while it wasn't the outcome we were hoping for, we know that President Trump made this decision with the knowledge that he's doing what is best for the people of Jacksonville. Meanwhile, the city council president, he says that this is the right decision. He had actually scheduled a meeting for this morning to discuss legislation because he was backing away from the plans to host the RNC a month out unless the host committee could convince them otherwise. And this all means people from across the country, like Republican fundraiser Dan Eberhardt, who we talked to, will not be traveling here.
I mean, I think this is a retreat, but I think it's what makes sense in the context of the surging virus in Florida.
And a smaller number of GOP people will be gathering still in Charlotte to renominate the president, and he is expected to make an acceptance speech that is a little different, so we're still waiting to hear how that will turn out. Live downtown, Renata DiGregorio, First Coast News, on your side.